What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about The Wolfman. So this is a review of the 2010 The Wolfman and not the original from the early 40s with Lon Chaney Jr. I am incredibly excited to go back and revisit that movie, so I'm doing this a little bit out of order, but I'm incredibly happy to have Blacktastic Media here in another video to talk about The Wolfman. And what I can say about this collab review is it's definitely one of those things I really enjoy, where I just pick a random movie for a random friend that I would love to hear their thoughts on a movie, and then they have a completely differing opinion from me. It makes these videos fun, and it kind of gives you guys the ability to be able to listen to two different opinions and you know, kind of give your take on it, see which side you land on. And which side am I on? Well, I love this movie. We're going to hear from Blacktastic in just a little bit. But what I can say about this movie right out of the gate is, though it's not a fantastically written film, I find it to just be a fun horror monster film that I feel honors that original film while also doing something incredibly different. It has really believable performances that I really do enjoy, though I can admit that this film doesn't have the greatest character development or writing for all of these characters. But what I can say is I do genuinely enjoy this movie, and I remember seeing it for the very first time at 16 thinking, I really like this. Now, when I saw it that first time at 16, I was really into the movie, and I was really excited to see where it would go. And then I remember specifically that there was, at some point in the movie, some lady had her phone on and the screen was too bright, and the guy behind her asked if she could turn it off, and it started this whole argument, and the managers had to come in and take them out, and it turned into this whole thing. But from what I remembered from seeing it the first time, I really enjoyed it, and I ended up going back to see it in theaters twice, and then I ended up buying the movie, and I've seen it many times since. And what I can say is there are moments of this film that are a little slow. There are some moments of dialogue and some cheap jump scare moments throughout the film that I feel could be cut and kind of wasted time that could have been implemented into character development and more character moments. I still really enjoy this film, though. I find this to be a really solid film that I think is one of the better remakes as far as the horror monsters go, the Universal horror monsters, I mean. This film stars people like Benicio Del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, and Emily Blunt, and tells the story of Lawrence Talbot, a man who is an actor and is now in the States, and he ends up coming back home after he finds out that his brother has been absolutely mutilated by some sort of creature. We end up finding out not too long into the film that it is a wolf of sorts, a werewolf, and our main character, Lawrence Talbot, played by Benicio Del Toro, ends up getting bit himself and becomes the iconic The Wolfman. As a kid, I loved that original film. I just enjoyed the imagery, and when I looked at the lineup of Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Invisible Man, the creature from the Black Lagoon, and all the rest, and Wolfman was in there, I always just thought he stood out. I just enjoyed the idea of this feral creature, this person that turned into this monster, and I always just thoroughly enjoyed the imagery behind the Wolfman. He was just a character that I always loved, and I always wanted to see a more modern approach and take to the character. So when we actually finally got a movie, I was all in. And when I saw the trailer, when I saw the posters, which I'm sure you guys are seeing all over here, these posters are so great. I love the practical effects done on the werewolf in this film, on the Wolfman. I really thoroughly enjoy the way he looks. I love how visceral it looks. I love how ferocious it looks. And all the praise really has to go to Rick Baker, who is iconic for this kind of stuff. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, horror makeup movie artist of all time. He did another little small movie maybe you've heard about called An American Werewolf in London. One of the most amazing werewolf films of all time, if not the best. And he's absolutely phenomenal in that film as well. He does a great job of bringing the visuals to life and making them, you know, visuals that really stand the test of time. And I think he did that exactly right here too. Though the film does have its issues narratively, and I can understand where some people might get bored in certain sequences in this film, visually, the tone, the feel, the vibe of this film, it all just really works for me. This film is directed by Joe Johnston, who's a director who has kind of a mixed reputation depending on who you're talking to, but is a director that I thoroughly can say I've enjoyed most of his work. Everything from Honey, I Shrunk the Kid to The Rocketeer to The Page Master to even Jurassic Park 3, which is a bit of a hot take, but I love that film. This one, I just really enjoy him as a director. He also did Captain America, The First Avenger, which is another film that I think when people look at the MCU, they don't have the fondest viewpoint on, but it's a film I really enjoy, and I love the way he established and kind of leaned into the comic book feel and vibe. that movie kind of needed to establish a character like Captain America. And when you look back at all those films, I feel like it was an important piece of the story, and I enjoy what he did with the film, though there are elements about that film that I have my criticisms on as well. But on an overall level, I can say I enjoyed Joe Johnston as a director. I enjoyed his vision in films, and though there are elements of all his films that feel like maybe they rushed over some things, or some things feel a little bit muddled, or some things feel a little bit underdeveloped, what I can say is visually, usually in the performances, I do really enjoy that about his films. And this one is no different. Now, before I continue my thoughts on this, let's go ahead and hear what Blacktastic had to say about this one.
Yo, what's up? It's your boy doing a collab with my man Anthony A. Perez. My boy hit me up on Instagram. You down for another? Come on now, brother. You know the answer. I'm down. He sent me the poster. I was like, oh, shit. The Werewolf. 2010 by Universal. I'm like, oh man, yeah, I got a lot to say about this movie. Look, I'm an old school monster man. The Werewolf, The Mummy, Frankenstein. Those are my type of joints when it comes to horror and monster films. The Werewolf is my favorite character, maybe besides Dracula. Love the Werewolf. And the original movie, to me, still holds up to this very day. There's something primal about a man changing into a half man, half wolf because he's bitten by a beast. I love stuff like that. Kind of like the Incredible Hulk. You got a man who changed into this gigantic Hulk of a figure. Joe Johnston is the director of this film. I'm like, oh, mistake number one. All I got to say is Jurassic Park 3. Need I say more? This movie has an all-star cast, man. Benicio Del Toro, my favorite Puerto Rican of all time. If I die and came back as a Puerto Rican, I want to be him. Emily Blunt's in this movie, and Sir Anthony Hopkins. I'm like, great cast. I don't really care for the director that much, but you know, maybe the script is good. Well, here's the script. It's 1891 in London. Benicio Del Toro's character is an American stage actor. Okay, problem number one. He gets a letter to return home because his brother was bitten by some feral animal beast. I'm like, okay, well, that's a different twist. You got a Puerto Rican playing a white man going to London. Alrighty then. He gets there. His dad is played by Sir Anthony Hopkins, and his brother's wife, now widowed wife, is Emily Blunt. Emily Blunt is incredibly beautiful in this movie. I mean, it takes place in 1891, so I love movies that are period pieces. The costumes, the atmosphere was gorgeous, and she looks like she could be from that era. Gorgeous. All she did in this movie was be gorgeous. She added nothing to this movie. Sir Anthony Hopkins, when he was on screen, he was fantastic, but he wasn't in the movie enough to save this film. Benicio, he was cool. I like his character. The dude's a great actor, and he looked like he can be a goddamn Wolfman. Perfect casting. Boy, this movie must have been cursed because it sucked. Now, here are the facts. The movie cost $85 million to make originally, but it ballooned to $150. They changed directors. They changed the score. It was a mess. People was not getting along. Disagreements. It was doomed. It should have came out back in 2007. Didn't come out until 2010. They didn't start filming until 2008. It was early developed in 2006. Problematic film. The best achievement of this movie is Rick Baker. You're like, man, that name sounds kind of familiar. Well, I'm going to tell you why, buddy. Back in the 80s, he got an Oscar for Best Makeup for American Werewolf in London. 30 years go by, come full circle, the man wins another Oscar for Best Makeup for The Werewolf 2010. Matter of fact, they created the category Best Makeup because of this dude right here. That is the best thing about this movie, was the Oscar win. Man, this movie, now I'm talking from personal experience. This movie was not scary. I didn't care about the story. It was boring. He was not the werewolf enough. It was like, wow, I guess they decided to go with CGI for the transformation. Man, are you serious? It was cartoonish when he changed into the werewolf. Now, the movie was surprisingly grotesque, bloody. That was a pleasant surprise. He was tearing people up in this fucking joint. But this movie, every bad movie have a silver lining somewhere, right? The cast was great. I like some of the grotesqueness of the film. And it looked great. I mean, beautiful settings, beautiful costumes. This movie had everything trying to go for it, but they did not deliver. I don't know if it's the director's fault. It just didn't land. And this movie bombed at the movie theaters. I think it opened up at 31 million or something like that. Went on to gross like 60 million. Dude, come on. This thing was dead on arrival. It was bad, man. This movie was disappointing. It basically killed the franchise for Universal's Monsters. They tried to come later on with The Mummy. Tom Cruise. We all know how that turned out. But this franchise is cursed, man. The Invisible Man was a surprise nice hit. So now they're talking about doing another Wolfman. Come on. Boy. Just watch the original from way back in the day. It's better. This movie hurt my soul how bad it was. This movie sucked ass. But with that, I say, be sure to stick around now for the closing of our movie review of The Werewolf by Anthony A. Perez. Peace, love, and Black History Month. I'm out. And yo, it's just my point of view.
A big thanks to Blacktastic Media for being here in another video. Always love hearing your thoughts, man. And it's a shame to hear that you didn't like this movie, because whenever I do these collab reviews, I usually just look at my list of thumbnails that I've created for movies that I've just recently seen or films that I plan to revisit for my channel. And then I'm just like, hey, who of my friends on my YouTube friends or new people that I'm meeting would I like to have in a video for this one? And so it's usually just kind of chosen by random. But since I've already done a few mummy films with Blacktastic, I figured why not have him do another Universal horror monster movie with me, and that was The Wolfman. And I was hoping that you would like this movie, but it is, it's a bit of a bummer, but I will say that's part of what I love about this channel, is the ability to talk to different people with different opinions and see what they think. And I really do enjoy you just being honest on your take on this film, and I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say, because I think I know for myself at this point that this is a film that I'm probably in the minority in. This is a film that is not beloved by fans or critics, but it's a film that does have its merits that people praise, but it's a film for me that I just thoroughly enjoy. I find this movie to be a good time. I really do enjoy the visuals of this film. I love all the sequences with the Wolfman, and I really enjoy the cast of this film. I enjoy the characters that they play, though I can agree that there are elements of this film that could have been developed far more. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are some cheap jump scares, and that definitely has to be one of my least favorite parts of this movie. When you're watching this movie, it is a shame that there are these random dream sequences throughout the course of the film that just kind of lead to a werewolf jumping at screen and kind of startling you with loud noise and a roar. I think that that's without a doubt my least favorite thing about any film like this, because at the end of the day, when I watch a Universal horror monster film at this point, I'm not going in for the horror element. Sure, the imagery, maybe the blood, the guts, all that kind of leans into the horror vibe, but I always kind of see it more as an aesthetic kind of thing, as a tone kind of thing, that kind of gothic Halloween kind of horror vibe, just kind of visually, and maybe some of the blood and gore, but not necessarily ever to be kind of scared. I think it's been decades now at this point since anybody's necessarily genuinely been scared of those classic films, but you can appreciate the imagery, the stuff that definitely lends itself to horror, the stuff that definitely lends itself to horror of the time, and the makeup and all that stuff. That is what really stands out and lends itself to this very gothic kind of Halloween feel and vibe. And that's where with this film and a lot of the other horror monster adaptations that we've gotten, even like the Brendan Fraser mummy movies, or the one with Tom Cruise, or Dracula Untold with Luke Evans, you do have these that kind of take these characters from the horror genre and kind of make them more action adventure films, or just things that are a little bit more almost like comic book movies in a way, like they're different kinds of horror films. So I never go into a movie like this expecting to be scared. When they do try to do scares in this film, a lot of times it's cheap. There are a few effective scares in the film, but nothing that's necessarily terrifying. But that's not really why you come to a movie like this. This is a movie that, I feel is really well acted with some great visuals. I love the way the Wolfman looks. I love so many of the sequences in here when he is shredding through people and having these great moments of just killing people and being the Wolfman, which is what you came to this movie for. I really enjoy it. I enjoy the story, and by the end of the movie, I always wanted a sequel, which they kind of leave a cliffhanger that there could be a sequel, but they never did. This film, Dracula Untold with Luke Evans, and the latest, The Mummy with Tom Cruise, all three of those were meant to start a beginning of a new version of the Universal Horror Monsters, and all of them in some way, shape, or form, whatever the reason, whether it was reception from the fans or lack of box office, profit, it just never really went anywhere, which is a damn shame. I really still love this film. I love Benicio Del Toro as the Wolfman. There are sequences in this film that have stuck with me over 10 years now at this point, and it's just a film that, or at least 10 years, I don't know when it came out. I should have probably looked at the exact date, but it's about to be 10 years since this movie came out, and on overall, I could say that I still really love this movie from when I saw it in theaters the first couple times to all the future rewatches that I would end up having of this film. One of my favorite sequences of this film is a scene where they have him in an insane asylum, and he's strapped up in a wheelchair to the center of this room where there's a bunch of scientists and doctors and police officers all watching as this very cocky doctor at this insane asylum is, pretty much telling him he's going to sit here, and when the moon turns to the full moon, nothing's going to happen. This will be a way for us to see his lunacy, and that he thinks he's this werewolf, that he's going to turn into this werewolf, and we'll see with him that nothing is going to happen. And I love this sequence because you have the doctor giving this very, cocky monologue and just being so kind of snarky about the fact that nothing's going to happen, and slowly behind him he starts to become the Wolfman. Lawrence starts to become the Wolfman, and you start to see all of these men and doctors that are in this room starting to slowly react like something weird is happening, until the point he finally does become the Wolfman. Doctor! And again, I just love the way that the Wolfman looks in this movie. The special effects are top notch, and Rick Baker has to be praised for that. And Blacktastic mentioned that he wasn't a huge fan of the CG transformation sequences, and though I agree they probably could have done something really cool with practical effects, I do enjoy the CG moments of this film. I feel like they fit the tone of the film and the aesthetic vibe of the film, that I feel like it never really takes me out of the movie. The shot that I used in the thumbnail is probably my favorite shot in the movie, which is a CG shot of the Wolfman as he's kind of like just opening his mouth and roaring right before he's fully practical in the next shot. And I really enjoy this sequence. I love the way he looks as he's turning into the Wolfman. I enjoy the way his body is kind of contorting, his fingers are kind of snapping in different directions, and I love the way his jaws kind of like just moving in all these different directions. He's got blood coming from his gums as these fangs start to come out, and I just love how awesome he looks in this sequence, even though it's CG and literally moments later he'd be practical. And he looks phenomenal in both, in my opinion. I really thoroughly enjoy the visuals of this film. I enjoy the action. I enjoy the characters. But what I can agree with is that this film is not perfect. This is a film that I can maybe say is like a guilty pleasure for me. A film that I can recognize is slow at times, that does have a lack of character development at times, that does struggle with telling a compelling narrative at times, and that does have these slower moments that just kind of feel like they could have been cut from the film with some cheap jump scares. But for the most part, I really enjoy this film, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. So, are you a fan of The Wolfman? Do you think it's good like I do, or do you think it's not so great like Blacktastic? Also, I want to know, where do you stand as far as your opinions on Joe Johnston as a director? Are you someone like me who is kind of on the opposite side of a lot of people and loves Jurassic Park 3? Or are you one of those people who doesn't like that movie? Are you a fan of the rest of his work, like things like The Page Master, The Rocketeer, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? I definitely want to know what your opinion on Joe Johnston is. Definitely leave those comments down below, hit that like button, and go down below in the description box where you can find the link to Blacktastic Media. Go give them some love, subscribe to both of our channels, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.